New Zealand has passed a new customs law allowing officers to carry out digital searches on passengers' electronic devices. Under the law, incoming travellers could face prosecution and hefty fines if they don't give the passwords for their electronic devices to immigration officers. Is this an invasion of privacy or necessary to keep the country safe? Well, to discuss this, we're joined from Las Vegas by Thomas Beagle. He's the chairman of the New Zealand Council for Civil Liberties. And in Toronto, we have Dean Correia. He's a security consultant with the Security Executive Council, a US-based risk and advisory firm. Thomas, let me start with you. How do you feel? I guess you're not happy about this new law. Tell me why.
We're not happy about it because I believe it's a unwarranted and unjustified invasion of people's privacy. The issue is it's actually only for customs purposes, and it's also only based on having reasonable cause, which you can't challenge in any way. And unfortunately, people store their entire digital lives on their phones. It gives too much access to government to what's on there.
So, Thomas, I've got your concerns, but when we think about it, New Zealand's hardly the most draconian society around. Why don't you trust that these individual officers would be able to differentiate between reasonable cause and just being mean and going through people's stuff?
Not least, it's because of their history. There's been a history of customs officers abusing their powers to do unauthorised searches on behalf of the police. There's also been a worrying trend in doing racial and ethnic profiling on people coming through the border, particularly picking on the local Syrian expat community.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Dean, you've heard some of the concerns coming from Thomas. Do you accept that maybe New Zealand hasn't properly thought this through?
No, I think that they are doing their diligence, and I think it's important for them to get the information out and allow travelers into New Zealand to realize what the new parameters are of entry into New Zealand and make a decision for themselves. There are many laws and regulations that we help our members with worldwide, and it's something else to consider as you're traveling. For me personally and professionally, there's no law or corporate policy that I've ever experienced in my time with the Security Executive Council that covers every possible innuendo or scenario. I think that they are putting this out, performing their diligence, and then on a case-by-case basis will evaluate whether there is a need to ask you to unlock your phone, providing the password, and not providing the password to them and keeping it to yourself. And in my opinion, there are certain, the climate's changed, the risk climate has changed, and I equate the analogy with driving every day. Is there a chance that I could be stopped when I'm driving by an officer? Sure. Is the likelihood that I'll be stopped if I'm not abiding to all traffic laws and regulations? Sure. So I travel quite a bit, and I know it's a parameter that I must take my passport. And when I'm at the border, whether I'm asked certain questions or not, I feel that it's something that we need to do, and I trust that the officers will do their diligence before a reasonable search or an invasive search is required of anybody.
Dean, one of the arguments is that, well, you don't have your entire personal life inside your car, right? They're not going to go through everything. You don't have, pictures of your kids or your travel itinerary or whatever that might be. Let me ask you, would you accept and be comfortable with traveling to New Zealand and them asking you to unlock your iPhone and for the customs officer to spend 10 minutes alone with your iPhone? Would you be comfortable with that?
I personally would be. I have nothing to hide. I think that if you are worried about this type of a parameter, you need to think, what just reason could a border protection agency in New Zealand have to search my phone? And I believe that they don't have the time, the resource, or the inclination to search multiple hundreds or thousands of phones without just cause. And if that were to take place, then the public outcry in this day and age, with the way social media, everyone's engaged with social media, would be tremendous, and they would have to adjust, would be my belief. I can point to other parameters put by other customs agencies in other countries, such as having to declare if you carry $10,000 cash or more.
Right. Is that? But Thomas is saying they're picking on, for example, Syrians, right? Is that par for the course? If you're Dean Correia, you're unlikely to have your phone searched, but if you're a Syrian or somebody from the Arab world perhaps, you know what, this is the nature of the world, you just have to let them go through your phone. Is that the reality, Dean?
I don't see any evidence to support that reality. I mean, the New Zealand Public Authority has come out with, there are 14 million travelers in New Zealand recently, and there were something like 560 searches. So I think from a branding point of view, there is no vested interest for law enforcement or border protection in New Zealand to create multiple unwarranted searches. I don't think they have the time or the inclination to do that. And as any regular citizen, whether you're at the border, walking around, driving around, if you feel that the behavior or treatment you receive from law enforcement or everyone else, there's different vehicles that you can choose to voice your concern.
Okay, so Thomas, address that for us. There's no unwarranted profiling happening in New Zealand. There's no evidence for that. Address that, Thomas.
Well, I believe it has been addressed, but I think it's important to note that this law is actually not for the purpose of controlling threats to our country. It's actually for the purpose of stopping the import of certain unauthorized goods. This is a power for the Customs Department. It's for using for customs purposes only, and that's why we believe it's such an overreach.
And do you think it would be used for things beyond customs purposes?
That's what we're partly scared of, that we have laws in our country about when the police and security intelligence services can do things like search phones or get other information. We believe that this is being used as to get around those laws. So it's circumventing the existing laws, the existing restrictions we've put in place, and saying that, oh, we can let customs do it at the border, we can suck off all the information off the phone and store it, and then we can keep that forever and use it and pass it on to other agencies.
So Dean, is customs the Trojan horse here? We're saying it's about customs, but actually if we have security concerns about you, that's the real reason we're going to be going through your stuff.
Again, I don't see any evidence. I don't know of any evidence, whether in New Zealand or elsewhere, to support that claim. Could they take your personal information and do something else with it? There's a risk. For sure. I mean, there's the same risk of that happening when you have a social media profile. I believe that the intent is to enhance protection in New Zealand. Electronic crimes have been committed using electronic devices. They are being committed right now using devices, and they will be committed using devices. So I think that it's another layer of protection. It's not a panacea. It's not a one-stop shop, or nothing's perfect. But I think it's another layer that, in considering the crime risk and the environment that we live in today, is a prudent step for the New Zealand government to take.
Dean, would you accept the same if you travel to a country like, I don't know, Pakistan?
Would I accept if they asked me to unlock my phone and view my phone? And again, I think that if there is just cause, I would push back on that if I didn't believe there's just cause, whether I'm in New Zealand, Pakistan, Canada, or wherever. And then we could take it from there in terms of that conversation at that moment in time. As I would, for any reason for them to want to search my person, my vehicle, my bags, whether I'm traveling by car across the border or by plane.
Thomas, help me understand. Is your argument that this is illegal, or that it's legal but it's a slippery slope and it can be abused?
It's legal, but it's well, obviously it's legal because they just passed a law for it, even though it's against our Bill of Rights. But at the same time, I believe it's not only a slippery slope. I believe it's just an unwarranted intrusion. It's unnecessary. It's unjustified. I mean, we talk about our local situation. We don't have huge amounts of smuggling. If you want to talk at the wider security risks, we don't have a lot of crime. And the last terrorist act was about 30 years ago, and it was committed by the French government. We just don't have the needs to pass these sorts of invasive laws.
So why do you think they've done it, Thomas?
Why I believe they've done it, because I believe that the Customs Department in New Zealand has aspirations to become more of a border protection agency, and they see that as part of that, and because they've got a long history of abusing their powers to support the NZ Police and others.
And Dean, for those who have general fears around the world that we're losing our privacy, we're losing our ability to keep things to ourselves, we're losing, we have all these devices and we have all these wonderful gadgets, but ultimately governments are nefariously trying to scoop up all of our data and might, we don't know, but they might actually use it against us Is that a general trend, or is it just fear-mongering?
I think it's a bit of both. I think that you can't do this from a security and a risk mitigation point of view. You can't do the same thing over and over again and expect the same results. So there's governments, there's businesses, entities trying different things. And if you have a personal concern, there's certain things that you can definitely do to minimize the risk of your personal information being delivered or going outside of where you want it to be. And I think that you cannot travel to New Zealand. You cannot have a social media account. You cannot have an electronic device. But I think that laws like this, policies like this, are meant to mitigate some of the risk to a broad group of people and on a case-by-case basis, whether you object to it, whether you're offended by it, and that's something you need to address.
Thomas, final word to you.
Final word is that I think that the real problem here is that it's getting at the normal people, because anyone who is doing criminal acts are just going to wipe their phone before they come through the border, and then when they get in the country, they're going to restore it from the cloud. So to me, it looks like an ineffectual measure which is going to catch normal people and not criminals.
Okay, Thomas Beagle and Dean Correia, good to have you on the Newsmakers. Thanks for joining us.